Today, Donald Trump had a press conference in the UK, but even before that, he gave an advanced interview with The Sun, or maybe he didn't. He doesn't think that he did, but they posted the audio, so it seems like he did. It gets complicated once you get into the weeds there. He talked about a lot of things, but I think the most interesting part of it, perhaps, is his discussion of European culture. He's a cultural critic. He doesn't think that what's happening recently is good for Europe. He said a lot, but here's a few parts. Allowing the immigration to take place in Europe is a shame. I think it changed the fabric of Europe, and unless you act very quickly, it's never going to be what it was. And I don't mean that in a positive way.
We got that.
I think, yes, exactly. You didn't need to say that, we know. I think you were losing your culture. Look around. You go through certain areas that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. I don't think he's gone through those areas. But he goes on to say, I think it has been very bad for Europe. I think what has happened is very tough. It's a very tough situation. You see the same terror attacks that I do. I just think it's changing the culture. I think it is a very negative thing for Europe. I know it is politically not necessarily correct to say that, but I will say it, and I will say it loud. And can I just briefly moment, don't take that off. So the expression is politically correct. It's not about whether it's correct or not. That's just an expression. So when you say politically not necessarily correct, you're not saying anything. That doesn't mean anything.
Well, but you are making it clear that you're a white nationalist, racist, proto-fascist who deserves to be hustled out of that White House as quickly as we can get him out of there.
Yeah,
that's just, I'm tossing that out.
Yeah,
can I high five you right now? Not well.
I'll take responsibility for that. I'll take responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the Nazi comparisons are generally weak and foolish and undermine an argument. But that is precisely the language that the National Socialists used in Germany in the 1930s about Jews, and now they're using it about Muslims.
Yep.
All right, so
and probably Jews too.
Right. Keep it real.
In a pinch, yeah.
Yeah. So the right wing will say, "Well, are you saying?" Because they'll overgeneralize and they'll do a straw man argument. Oh, so we can't criticize anybody's culture? No, nobody's saying that. And if some small number of people are saying that, we don't agree with them. So if Donald Trump was specific, hey, there's a part of our culture that I think is problematic, and I don't think we should adopt that part of that culture, there would be great agreement. And I've used this example 1,000 times. In some Central Asian countries, they still do kidnapping of women and then sexual assault, and then they marry them, okay? So that is because of the nomadic culture that arose in Central Asia back in the day. That part of the culture is wrong, and you are allowed to criticize it. Now, there are other parts of Central Asian culture that are fantastic. Each culture, including Western culture, has wonderful parts and terrible parts. So if you were to have an intelligent conversation around culture, that would be great, that would be wonderful. And that's a conversation the country should have. It's a challenging one sometimes, and you need a little bit of courage to engage in that conversation. But when you say the immigrant culture is bad, what does that mean?
Every immigrant.
Every immigrant and every part of their culture? See, that's why it's racist. Like, you think we throw that word around? No, if this isn't white nationalism, what is? When you say everything is wrong about the immigrant culture, how could that possibly be true? No, you're not worried about the culture. Then you're making a comment about who they are, their personhood.
You're also saying everything is great about the white European culture. I mean, that's the flip side of it, is our great white European culture. Well, you know, we had some pretty barbaric history in the white European culture too, including today in the United States.
And they're so blind to that. One of the things that I was most amused by is when the right wing grabbed something I said and made headlines all over the right wing websites. They're like, Cenk Uygur outrageously says that the Holocaust was committed by Christians. But that's who, it wasn't the Muslims and it wasn't the Buddhists. So but they're so blinded because they think no true Scotsman would do that. No true Christian would, because Christians are great. And by definition, they must not have done the Holocaust, even though it was Christians who did it. Not necessarily because they were Christians, but then that gets to the point we're making. Some Muslims do terrorist attacks, but not necessarily because they're Muslim, or they certainly don't represent all Muslims. So when you say, oh, no, the Nazis don't represent all Christians, of course not, right? But the terrorists don't represent all Muslims. And the fact that you can't even see that is what's wrong with this level of thinking.
Yeah, and on to the barbarism that I love the idea of him going to this country and saying, as a white person, you all are barbaric for coming in here. When you go back a year or two, and we're bombing their countries, we're devastating them economically. Go back 10 years, go back 20, 50, 100, 200. Throughout that entire span, we come in, we steal their resources, we disrupt their society, we overthrow their governments if they ever get a shred of democracy, and every possible opportunity, we kill them. Then we say now, you all are barbaric for coming to us largely to escape the chaos that we were instrumental in causing.
We took 3,000 children, took them away from their families and haven't made no effort to reunite it. And we did it to, one, prove a point to discourage other people from coming, and two, to win an election in November, to fire up a vase and get them excited.
And that sounds pretty barbaric.
That sounds a little barbaric. It's just they are dressing up. Trump is the modern day 21st century version of a white citizens council. They put on a tie and they take off the mask.
Yeah, and so look, guys.
Hood.
So it's the wraparound mask.
The whole thing.
Thank you.
Again, they're so blinded. Like, look, Western culture has wonderful parts. My family moved from Turkey. I mean, that's kind of in the middle of the world, but if you want to call it the East, we moved from there to America because we love America. There's so many great parts of American culture. By the way, one of which is that it accepts all other cultures, right? And we have a boiling pot, and we have great contributions from Italians, Irish, Jews, yes, Muslims, yes, blacks, yes, Latinos. That's part of what was inviting about America and democracy and all those things. But is the West infallible? Does it have terrible parts of its culture? If you can't see that it does, there's something weird about you. We had slavery, that was pretty bad. The Holocaust happened in the West. It didn't happen in the East, it happened in the West. Now that doesn't mean everybody in the West is guilty, it doesn't mean all white people or all Christians are bad people, but that is also part of our heritage and our culture, and that is something we should root out. And so we have to be open to all cultures, but that doesn't mean we have to accept every part of each culture. But when you say, I'm against multiculturalism, that means you're saying, I'm only for one culture, I'm not for your other cultures, good or bad. And what's the one culture you're in favor of? It's obvious, the white culture. That's why when Richard says you're a white nationalist, that's exactly what you are.
And then when guys like Ben Shapiro speak up and say that, is there, and they would have heard your point and be like, hey man, once again, here's Cenk Uygur equating all cultures. Is it so wrong to acknowledge that some cultures are better and we're more comfortable with than other cultures, right? I suppose, sure, everybody's more comfortable with a certain culture. But that would also hold then that because you don't want to be infected with other cultures, they don't want to be infected with us, which should make us think about our foreign policy.
Yeah. Look, Trump is just brazen about it. It used to be a dog whistle, and it ain't a dog whistle anymore. We can all hear it when he says they're coming in here with their culture and changing ours and making our culture worse. That's some 1930s talk. Yep. And it is not subtle, it's not intellectual, it's not an attempt to tweak and protect the ideals and the traditions of democracy. He doesn't even believe in rule of law. It is an attack on other races. So you have to call it what it is. Yes, those comments are deeply racist. 2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.